this lecture, this discussion, I prepared a few notes a few days ago, and it was a really good lecture. I wish you guys would have been there. It was a good one, because I was looking over my notes just before, and I don't know what I was thinking about. But that's okay, because you ever notice you never know what your next thought's going to be? You never know what your next thought's going to be. And healing happens in the moment, in the present time. It doesn't happen in the past, and it doesn't happen in the future. It can only happen right now, in the present moment. So that makes it a little difficult to prepare a really nice discussion that's all perfectly laid out, because the discussion has to reflect the present moment. We have to live the principles, which means the conversation emerges in the moment, which means we don't know exactly what we're going to say. But I do know that healing happens in the moment, because, as we said yesterday, healing's a movement towards wholeness. Healing is part of wholeness. And wholeness expresses in the present moment. It doesn't express in the past. It doesn't express in the future. Only the mind moves to present and future. Healing has to move beyond the mind and include the wholeness of what we are and who we are, which is much more than the body, much more than the mind, much more than the emotions, but the true self, Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss, the eternal soul. So we have this natural movement towards this wholeness that we're all made and we're all experiencing all the time, whether we realize it or not. The entire life is a movement towards wholeness, though sometimes it doesn't look like it. Everything is always trying to move towards wholeness. It's a principle of life. So our job then, either as physicians or as healers, everybody's a healer in some way or shape or form. Some of the best healers I know are the housekeepers in the hospital. They are some amazing healers in the hospital. These housekeepers, they're just there humbly doing their service, cleaning these rooms, cleaning up. But you look at them and they have this joy in their face, and they express so much joy, and you just feel better being around them, and the patients get better. The patients get better when these people come in the room. And I know there's a lot of people here that are in different aspects of healthcare, some physicians and some practitioners of various sorts, and they agree. It's true, huh? Yeah. So everybody has the capacity to be a healer. Everybody. How do we do that? See, I don't know why we're on this topic. This isn't anything what the notes were about. It's in the moment. Well, there is something perfect inside of everyone. That's an essential truth. It's a scientific fact. And you can prove it. I'm sure everybody here at some point or another has either had a bruise or a cut. A cut is a good example. If you cut your hand and it bleeds a little bit and you put some pressure and the bleeding stops, after the bleeding has stopped, what happens? Okay, good. So there's an opening. And then what happens after that? It heals. It moves back to normal. It moves back to wholeness. So that gap closes to perfection. It doesn't go halfway and stop unless there's an infection or some derangement or imbalance in the physiology. But generally speaking, it closes back to perfection. It doesn't grow a whole new hand or a whole new part back to perfection. So if you think about that a little bit, think about that. That means there has to be something that's recognizing a disturbance or an imbalance, and something that's recognizing a perfection that's not disturbed. Right? If there's a cut, there's something, the intelligence of the body, the intelligence of the prana, recognizes a disturbance, and it recognizes a perfect template. Some spiritual traditions call that the imago Dei, the perfect form. Some spiritual traditions call it the Atma, the true self. But there's this perfect form that precedes the genetic field. And it's always there. It can't not be, and it's a scientific fact. If you think about how your body responds when you get a bruise, an injury, a cut, a broken bone, there's a disturbance, there's perfection, and there's a movement back to the perfection. So that perfection is in each and every person all the time. Scientific fact. It's always there, always has been, always will be, can't not be. So if we notice that in each other, that gets accentuated. Because there's another scientific fact that what you pay attention to gets stronger, bigger, more accentuated. So if you just think about the perfection in the people that you're looking at or talking to, whether you see it or just acknowledging it is enough. That's what these house cleaners are doing. They don't know it, but they're doing this. And the aides in the hospital, they have no medical training. They come in, some of them are volunteers, some of them work for very little pay. They're changing bedpans, changing diapers, helping patients come to standing. Amazing things. And they're talking to them about the weather, about the sports, about what they love, about what the patient loves. And when you talk about what you love, when you think about what you love, what's happening? You're accentuating what you love. You're accentuating the love. So they're seeing the health, they're seeing the perfection, they're seeing the true self in the patients. And the patients are getting well. They're feeling better. And everybody can do this all the time. So you can acknowledge that there's a perfection inside of you, and just by acknowledging that essential truth, you'll feel something a little different. There'll be a change in your physiology. Because the physiology is an expression of the divine. Every thought, every emotion, every action changes or registers in your physiology. It's recorded. Every thought. If you think of your health, if you think of your perfection, if you think of your perfect form, there's a change in your physiology. Your heart rate goes down, your blood pressure goes down, your vision gets more clear. If you think of something stressful or something that's upsetting to you, it doesn't take long. You'll see your heart rate will go up, your blood pressure will go up. You won't feel as well. So everything that you need to heal and to be well is already inside of you. So the job of the physician then is to uncover that perfection, to find that perfection. To remove any obstructions that's preventing the natural flow of the life force. Ayurvedic medicine, osteopathic medicine, they're working with the laws of nature, natural laws. So that's why it's called natural healing, because it's working with what's already present, what nature is already trying to do. So then we want to get in sync, we want to synchronize with nature. We want to synchronize with life. Prana is always flowing. The life force is always moving. We have a personal life force, or a prana, and then there's prana Krishna, or the breath of life, that's flowing all the time, flowing through, passing through everything. It's creating, sustaining, and destroying. Destruction is part of life. If these three forces get out of balance, you will have some disease. Rajas, tamas, and sattva have to be in balance. They're like three threads of a rope, intertwined in perfect balance. The breath of life is expressing those three qualities with a sustaining force, a creative force, and a destructive force. For example, in your bones are actually changing shape throughout life. They're not a stuck, thick, rigid structure. They're changing shape. They're made to change shape. And to change shape, they have to have some destruction. So they have to have some disintegration and some building. So there's these special cells called osteoclasts, and they absorb bone. And there's these other special cells called osteoblasts, and they build bone. These two need to be in balance. When they're not in balance, you have osteoporosis, because you have too much destruction and not enough creation, or not enough sustaining. So the breath of life is passing through everything all the time, and it's bringing these forces of creation, destruction, and sustaining. And it's also bringing a tempo. The breath of life is bringing a tempo in the moment. So healing has a tempo. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow. And all of life has a tempo. Sometimes we have to move more quickly, sometimes we have to move more slowly. And if we're in synchronization with the tempo, we're going to have better health. We're going to have more energy. We're going to have more vitality. We're going to have more happiness, more peace. So finding the tempo of life is essential. It's essential to a happy life, to a successful life. How do you find the tempo of life, right? Well, the breath is a good way. There's several good ways. But the breath is a good way. A normal conscious breath will put you in synchronization with the tempo of life. And we talk about the normal conscious breath a lot in Kriya Yoga. It's often we hear in guided meditation, normal conscious breath, right? Normal conscious breath. So it's getting ingrained into our subconscious, normal conscious breath. But what is a normal conscious breath? What's normal? What's conscious? A normal conscious breath. What happens sometimes is the breath, which is supposed to be under the influence of Krishna prana, the breath of life, our thoracic breath. There's two breaths. Oh my goodness, we've got two breaths. We have Krishna prana, the breath of life, and we have this other breath, thoracic breath, where the diaphragm moves and the air flows. So we've got these two breaths that are supposed to be one, but they're two. But they're one.
You're confusing us.
Good. Thank you. So we have these two breaths. And so the thoracic breath, the normal conscious breath, is supposed to be under the influence of Krishna prana. So the breath of life is supposed to be giving the tempo, the rate, the shape of the thoracic breath. We don't understand that much about breathing, and yet we're taking a breath how many times a day? And even the medical science doesn't understand that much about the breath. They have it all tied up in the third ventricle, the brain, the fourth ventricle, and baroreceptors, and hydrogen ions, and all this. But they've left out the most essential piece, which is there is a breath of life that's passing through everything all the time, creating, sustaining, and destroying, and bringing the tempo of life, which means it's bringing the tempo of your breath, if it's under the influence of the breath of life. But the problem is, we get excited about life, and the ego creates these desires. And to fulfill these desires, we have to sometimes get out of sync with the breath of life. We have to get out of sync with life. So the mind speeds the breath up to create the energy, to create the gasoline, to fulfill the desires. So you start breathing faster, out of sync with what life is bringing. So now I start breathing faster. Not only am I breathing faster, but the prana, the life force, the breath, gets a little fussed up, because there's actually 5 subtle breaths in the body. We can talk about those a little later. But these 5 breaths that have a central fulcrum in the low abdomen need to be able to express in 5 directions. So when we start to get a little anxious, or start to develop a little attachment, or start to pursue a desire that's not being given by the breath of life, the breath has to speed up. It gets desynchronized from life. And the pranas get disturbed, and the breath actually starts to rise up. So if you notice your breath right now, just notice your breath. When you breathe in, the inhalation will feel like it comes to a stop at some place. It might feel like it's stopping at the diaphragm. It might feel like it's stopping in the abdomen. It might feel like it's stopping further down. But you'll notice someplace it feels like it's stopping. Do you notice that sensation when you breathe in? So notice where it is. Is it about the diaphragm? Is it a little higher? A normal conscious breath, that sensation of stopping would be all the way down in the pelvis. So you would breathe in and you would feel that motion all the way down to the pelvis, but also going up. When we're under stress, and the sympathetic nervous system rises, the Pingala channel, the right channel, gets activated, and that affects the flow of the prana, and it starts to rise. So the aprana that's supposed to be flowing down starts to come up higher, and the uprana that's supposed to go up naturally starts to rise even higher than its normal motion. So the breath, actually, it feels like you're breathing into here, not into here. Okay? So that's going to activate the sympathetic nervous system. That's going to activate the Pingala channel, which is going to create stress on the system. And it's going to desynchronize you from the flow of life. You're going to release adrenaline, epinephrine. You're going to release these biochemicals, so there's a change in your physiology. And your physiology changes. The heart rate goes up, the blood pressure goes up, the digestion slows down, the blood is shunted away from the digestive organs to the periphery, to the muscles for action. So what to do about this? Because it was really the mind that created this imbalance in the first place, right? So if you're going to try to use the mind to fix it, it might not work out so well. Because now you're using the part that made the problem to fix the problem. It's like the blind leading the blind, right? It's like going to a really sick person and asking them for medical advice. But the good news is, as we said earlier, everything is already trying to move to normal. We already showed that scientifically. When the hand is cut, it heals back to normal on its own. So there's already a therapeutic force. There's already something inside of you trying to move everything to normal. So what we can do is notice the breath without trying to change it. That's the most important thing. Don't try to change it if you want to reset the breath. So notice the breath, don't try to change it. And then notice that there's these three parts. There's an inhalation, and there's a pause, and there's an exhalation. Inhalation, pause, exhalation. Really notice the pause. The pauses of life is where the tempo is established. The pauses of life is where the tempo of life is expressed. So when we pause, that's when we get synchronized with life. But in this culture, how often do we get to pause? And yet in nature, there's a pause every 20 minutes. And there's a big pause twice a day. But we don't know that because we spend so much time in the city, and so much time behind computers, and so much time with modern life that we don't really know what's happening right outside the window here. So at every sunset and every sunrise, there's a pause. If you are outside or even inside and listening, everything comes to a stillness right before the sun comes up and right before the sun goes down. Everything comes to a stillness. If you notice, the birds will often come to a stop. The chirping will stop. The flying of the birds will stop. The animals will stop. Everything pauses. This is a natural pause built into life. So those are two big pauses every day. There's even bigger pauses than that. And then there's these little pauses in between. Sometimes the pause is short. But if you notice the pause and rest in the pause, you get resynchronized with life. And that changes your entire physiology. Your blood pressure comes down, your blood sugars regulate, your stress hormones reduce, your immune system is improved. Just by pausing when life pauses. And it's free. You don't have to spend a lot of money for it. You just have to listen. So we have these pauses in nature. Now we have this pause in the breath. We have an inhalation, a pause, an exhalation. Well, guess what? All the pauses are connected. Because life is whole. There's no parts to life. There's the appearance of parts, but there's one substance, one breath, one movement, one soul. So if you connect with the pause in your breath, you're connecting with the pause of life. So there's an inhalation, a pause, and an exhalation. And we just take our time with each of those three parts and watch it. You don't have to try to change it. You're just watching. So that's the consciousness. We said normal conscious breath. The mantra of Kriya Yoga, normal conscious breath. Watch your breath. If you watch the breath and synchronize with the pause and synchronize with the exhalation and notice the pause a little bit more, you might notice that the breath starts to feel like it's coming a little lower. When I first started, it was up here. Now it's down here. Now it's down here. So this stop point is moving down, which means the 5 pranas, the 5 subtle breaths, are coming into balance and harmony. So you're actually balancing the 5 pranas, changing the whole physiology, just with a normal conscious breath. The breath is now getting normal. It wasn't normal. Now it's coming to normal. Not by our own effort, but by our consciousness. Because it wants to be normal. It wants to come home. That's all it wants to do. Everything in nature just wants to come home. Do you feel your breath changing a little? Is it coming lower? Do you perceive that sensation? It's not so hard. You're perceiving your prana. You're perceiving your own life force. You're made to feel this. You're made to feel your prana. You're made to feel the prana, the breath of life. Everybody can feel it because you're made to. It's just that sense has atrophied a little bit because nobody talked about it. The breath of life is a real thing. Krishna prana is real and it loves you. It sustains you, it made you, and it wants you to feel it. And if you're feeling your breath change there a little bit, you're feeling your prana. You're getting in touch with the prana. And this prana will inform you so much about your life. It'll tell you if you're about to eat a food that's not good for you. So you don't have to memorize all these rules. We can give a lot of rules about food. And they're helpful and useful. But if you listen to your prana, you'll know. Because this brings a sensation. When the prana is in balance, and you start to move in a direction that's out of balance, it'll communicate. And it's called anxiety. That's the chronic state. It doesn't have to progress to that level. Anxiety is the chronic state of not listening to your own prana. but it communicates more subtly in the beginning. It's a little flutter. A little motion that says, oh, that's not quite the direction, because it doesn't quite, I'd have to use a little more, I'd have to change my breath to get there. My breath would have to change. I'd have to bring my breath up. But when the direction is right, in harmony with life, the prana opens. The whole space opens, and we naturally flow and move into it. This is real, and it's available to everyone. Everyone. So your physiology has changed. And we've tested this scientifically with patients, checking their blood pressure before and after, 20 points lower, just by teaching them how to breathe. Heart rate, 10 beats less a minute. Take care of your prana. Listen to your prana. It's your life force. It's who you are. And it will always lead you in the right direction. Trust it. This body temple is the perfect scientific instrument. There's no instrument more sensitive that man can make. Things that people were feeling thousands and thousands of years ago and have written about, some scientific instruments are just beginning to catch up to it. But they haven't even scratched the surface of how deep this instrument can perceive. And that's the prana. So I've said quite a bit. We have a little time left for any questions that anybody might have. About anything. It can be any topic.
The breathing and sensing of the breath, consciousness. If you have, say, trouble breathing for whatever reasons, obstructions or whatever, does this concept still apply with the same concept?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've got a little bit of breathing and allergy issues.
Mm-hmm.
I can still you can do the deep breathing and be conscious despite all those other obstructions as well. Obstructions.
Yes, but remember, nobody said deep breathing. Okay? We said normal conscious breath and just observing the breath. Okay, so observing the inhalation, the pause, and the exhalation. And then watching the breath slowly change. Because if you try to, deep breathing can be useful. And there's a place. But right now we're talking about one particular breath. A normal conscious breath. Okay? And we are going to say, I don't really know what a normal conscious breath is. What's a normal conscious breath? What's normal? Normal for you is different than for me, And normal at 6 o'clock in the morning is different than normal at 7 o'clock at night. Normal is only expressed in the present moment. Okay? So if I come to it and have made up my mind it needs to be a deep breath, I'm already in trouble. Because now I'm trying to go against normal. So I'm saying to prana and Krishna prana, Lord, I don't know what a normal conscious breath is. Please show me. Please show me. And I'm going to watch the inhalation, natural, and I'm really going to pay attention to the pause, no hurry, just the pause, and then a natural exhalation. And with the inhalation, I can notice that there's a stop point somewhere because the prana is a little bit disturbed. So we breathe in, and there's stop point. So as you watch it, that stop point is going to change. So you are correct. Any condition, it doesn't matter. Asthma, COPD, bronchitis, anything. There's no problem. But approach it as if I don't know what normal is right now. Because, okay, I knew what normal was this morning. I knew what my normal breath was this morning, but that's not the same truth now. Because now is now. And the breath of the morning was the breath of the morning. Now it's an afternoon breath. It has a different stop point. It has a different volume. It has a different rate. It has a different energy that Krishna prana is bringing with each breath. So Krishna prana is flowing through all of life. And it's like we have a dipper and we dip into the river of life and take a sip. That's the breath. And what's flowing through the river at 6 o'clock in the afternoon is different than what it was at 5 o'clock this morning. So the substance that the Krishna prana and the breath of life is bringing in the moment is different. It's a medicine. The breath of life is a medicine. But the medicine only works if we're synchronized with the tempo. And to synchronize with the tempo, we find a normal conscious breath, and that synchronizes us with the tempo of life. And it only happens in the present moment. I had a really beautiful normal conscious breath this morning. If I try to make that my breath now, it's not going to work. It would be a horrible lecture. Instead, you got a really good lecture. Yes, that's a very good question. Thank you. Anybody, anytime. But it's in the moment, and it's normal, conscious, without us deciding what it is. Okay?
Doesn't the act of watching the breath change the breath?
Mm-hmm. Your consciousness changes the breath.
And we are trying not to change it, so it doesn't.
You're allowing it to change. Because the part that's making the change is that perfect part we were talking about. So we said there's something perfect in you, right? That perfection is the observer, the silent observer. So the act of bringing your observation without trying to change it will allow it to change in a natural and normal way. You're connecting the breath to the Atma without effort. But it only works if you allow it to express and just watch it without trying to change it. Inhalation, pause, exhalation. And watching, little change. But no attachment to the change.
So if we are aware that the pelvic breath is the best, then we'll have a desire when we start for it to go.
So now you have an attachment. Yeah. And it's not going to work.
But you said if we pay attention, then make that happen. Right? No? If we pay attention to the pelvic area.
Only the breath. Guruji didn't say pay attention to the pelvis. He said pay attention to a normal conscious breath. That was the only instruction, normal conscious breath. It's simple but hard, because the mind wants to make all these other stories. Well, I know it's better in the pelvis. Well, sometimes. But to get there requires the tempo of life. So you can't go from here to here without the tempo taking you there. And the only way you can get the tempo is to synchronize with the breath and synchronize with the pauses and watch it so that the tempo is given to you, because we don't know what the tempo is. It could be instant. It could be, okay, I get a normal conscious breath and it's in the pelvis. But it could be that Krishna prana, the breath of life, needs to make some changes along the way to your physiology. See, this is a medicine. It's a precise medicine that has the exact potency, the exact prescription. So, what if there's an obstruction in the third chakra that needs a little release first? What if there is a little tension in the celiac plexus, which is a nerve plexus right at the midpoint here? And what if that extra nerve flow is disrupting the natural movement of the diaphragm? Okay, well, Krishna prana is going to resolve that first before it puts the breath to the pelvis. So we have to trust the tempo, the time, and the pace that it's giving us. So it's a matter of trust that the breath of life, Krishna prana, is going to heal you. It is healing. It's the only thing that can heal you. And it knows exactly how to heal you because it made you. So it may want to take its time. It may want to just sit here for a little while. And it may balance out your nervous system. And it may work out some acid reflux in your stomach because there was a little kink in the nerves and you were getting too much pressure into the stomach and you were releasing too much hydrochloric acid and you've got a little acid reflux. And that was way more important to the breath of life than you having a perfect breath in the pelvis. It's a very, very good point you raise. Oh, they said it was in the pelvis is the perfect breath. Well, the motion, the direction is more important than the destination. Because you're going to get to the destination. Guaranteed. Someday, somehow, we all will arrive at the destination. But we can only get to the destination at the rate and the pace and the tempo that Krishna prana gives. Yeah. Does that help? Yes, Ma.
So this only applies when we need like nothing to do. The breath knows what to do.
You can watch your breath all the time. Normal conscious breath does not mean that nobody said a normal conscious breath, is it fast or is it slow? Nobody said, is it short, shallow, or is it deep? The only instruction was normal conscious breath. So you can watch your breath without any attachment to how it's expressing in the present moment at any time. That will put your breath under the influence of Krishna prana. That will put your thoracic breath under the influence of the breath of life. And you could be exercising and watching your breath. Because we're not trying to control it. So when the breath needs to get faster because you're moving cement or carrying something heavy and more oxygen is needed, it will do so. And when you're sitting in meditation, it will slowly come calmer, 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 softer, 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 sweeter, 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 but more powerful. So what's interesting with the breath is this subtle, soft, sweet breath is more powerful than these big, fast, heavy breaths. And so when we're in meditation, the breath can really, really slow down because we've really, really synchronized with Krishna prana. So each breath brings so much vitality that's not getting consumed by the mind and the activities of the mind. It's consuming the prana and directing it to its own direction. But you can watch your breath anytime. Exercise, cooking, meditation, talking. Normal conscious breath. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much for a very...
Prana is always exchanging, always flowing. It can't not flow. So there's an exchange with everything in life. And God's in everything. So even the glass of water you're about to drink, or the food you're about to eat. Guruji says, see God in all or see God not at all. Okay? So then how much faith do we have in those words? Because if I have complete faith, there's no not God. Right? Everything, and am I behaving that way? If I'm not behaving that way, then I don't have complete faith in those words. So that means when I'm drinking the water, do I see God? Do I feel God? Do I feel Krishna prana? When I look in my neighbor's eyes? Yes, I agree. So that'll be a little bit of an extension of tomorrow's conversation. They're going to talk about Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And we're going to find out that there's actually 5 Vatas, 5 subdoshas. So there's 5 subtle breaths. Each has its own function and its own direction of movement. So there's aprana, which rests in the pelvis and is responsible for all the downward motions. If a woman has trouble with menses, there could be trouble with aprana. If there's constipation, there could be trouble with aprana. Then there's uprana, upward motion. Starts more about the navel, a little higher, uprana. Hiccups, imbalance, uprana, aprana. And there's samana vayu for digestion. And there's prana vayu in the head. It's down, sort of circle, inward motion. So we have these 5 subtle breaths. Normal conscious breath harmonizes the 5 subtle breaths. So now the 5 subtle breaths are working off of one intelligence. Because what happens sometimes is one prana starts to, the prana follows mind. And the mind says this, then it says this, and it says this, and it says this. And pretty soon the prana doesn't know what's its home. So now you've got aprana doing this, uprana doing that, samana doing this. It's all a big scrambled mess. But normal conscious breath harmonizes and puts everything in sync with the original breath, the breath of life. So first there was one, the breath of life. And then the breath of life diversifies into many, but it's still one. So that's the 5 subtle breaths. They want to be in harmony. So your normal conscious breath will harmonize the 5 subtle breaths. Then, if there's really a lot of trouble, there's herbs that can be used, there's diet, there's special pranayamas for harmonizing the various pranas. But still, the starting point is normal conscious breath. Listen to your breath, normal conscious breath. Thank your breath. Thinking of God and gurus, and remembering that there's something perfect within each and every one of us. I humbly bow to the divinity within each of you. Namaste.